Okay, here we are in July of 15. This is going to be the scenario titled The Donkeys, if we were tracking, where the individual scenarios go. I like the name of that one. Last one was Stalemate. This is another 6-monther. Well, we just keep playing the campaign game through it, but the difference here, I'm looking up in advance this time instead of getting surprised. I should have done it last turn, or a couple turns ago. Bulgaria has a chance of coming in starting in September as a Central Powers ally. And, well, as if they really need more. But it actually kind of opens up another little territory that maybe some problems can occur. And I think overall, though, it's just going to be resources for the Central Powers. When Romania comes in, they're going to be kind of a pain in the butt because they're kind of lodged in the Austrian and Bulgarian sector and might require me to devote some troops to that. Honestly, I don't know if Romania would even come in this kind of circumstance. I'm always questioning games that allow them to come in after southern Russia fails. If they can't link up with the Russian army, I just don't think, they sort of made an opportunistic decision to join the war, as did Bulgaria and, well, in their own way, Turkey, but Turkey made theirs so early in the war. Bulgaria's and Romania's decisions, though, were based on thinking that their side could win in that front, and it seems hard to believe that they would come in. But we'll just keep playing by the rules here. So, what do we got? We gotta wait until the beginning of next year, I think, to start buying tank infiltration attacks, so we don't have to worry about them too much. I've made the decision not to, go for economic warfare, at least yet. Maybe if I see a real use to punching the British, over and getting the Western values down. At this point, though, I got better things to do, and that's a good way to waste Allied money too, is if they want to keep supporting the Russians. And if they don't, well, I walk out of Russia with a lot of points and can launch an attack in the West. I got lots of points, though, and I still have some German units to build. I think it may be time to start throwing some of them onto the field. I don't think I want to buy Turks. They have too far to go. They kind of did all they could. It may be worth paying the 2 NRCs, though, to grab, Persia's only got one space. There's an asterisk here, too. Persia's only got one space I can get victory points in. And if I open that up, it doesn't really do me any good. It's not like it seals off the Brits in any way from making a landing. It just, in a sense, makes it actually easier. There's one thing that's kind of neat about this system. If I pay those 2 points to invade here, I'm only getting 1 point per economic phase from it, whereas if I held those 2 points behind, I get 2 extra points per economic phase. So obviously, it's not a good buy. Anything else here I want to do? Nothing I can think of right off the bat. Still going to focus on the Russians. I did not make every advance that I could here. Attacks up in here, pushed forward. The Russians should have surrendered. If they can surrender, they should have done it already. And they legally would have been allowed to. I should have done it as a player choosing there. Moscow fell to Turkey. I always do it as kind of a last resort type of thing, but honestly, let's take a look at what the rules are for it. Yeah, I would have been, by giving a piece, I would give less away. At this point, I don't want to give away everything I have. I think I would be still allowed to keep a rump here, and I think Russia's just going to surrender. They lost 2 more full armies and a corps. I could pump money into them, but it's not enough to save their asses. They can't get to St. Petersburg. Basically, they will be destroyed. It'll come to the point where they have no territory left whatsoever, and then they can't even re-enter the game if they're completely occupied. So I think I made a mistake by not surrendering last turn. I should do it this turn, and I think that'll be it for Russia. It costs some economic value to attack them, maybe about as much as we conquered. Although Moscow falling was, that's a big 5 points, so that definitely was something I shouldn't have allowed to happen. All right, so yeah, the Russians are going to surrender at this point. Now that the Central Powers turn is over, and I don't know what to do with the Allies given that. What can they do? They're really kind of locked in here, and I think I'm just going to entrench as best as I can and hope I can do what I can here. We've got the Germans building up their navy, which, there's no way that they're allowed to blockade England in this one, but you'd think they should be allowed to if they can, send their navy out and dominate the North Sea and the Channel and everything there. It just becomes hard to believe that the English would be able to get any shipping in, and then their economy should just pretty much collapse, as it would in La Grande Guerre. It's the problem with putting too light a naval system into the game. I think they didn't put enough oomph into the rules to handle all the possible occurrences. Of course, probably anybody reasonable at this point would be surrendering with the Entente, but I want to play it out a little bit more and see where we get with it. So I'll pretty much be converting units over to trench status and doing attrition attacks while the Germans are kind of weak over here. And those German fleets mean the English have to reciprocate and lay down a couple of fleets themselves. Attrition attacks are tremendously effective, scary effective actually. I'm making attacks mainly at 1 to 3. This one I think was at 1 to 2. But even there, if I get a bad result of 1, I'm paying right now for 3 armies basically to make an attack in each attack. That cost me about 3 points. For the Germans, they have 2 armies in defense because in part they have a mobile army in each unit. I've kept a bunch of mobiles in order to try to dislodge things. I probably need to convert those over because attrition attacks are the way to go in this game at this point. With that result, I'm doing 4 points to the 3 I'm causing. So even on sort of the worst result I can get, and there's nothing that causes 0, if I can get to the 1 to 3 chart. You can't make the attack if you can't get there. So like these guys with only 5 strength points couldn't get an attack on the 24 defenders. But the Germans have to convert their units over. They're realizing this now. They're moving their more mobile units with the surrender. I probably get to make a retreat or something. As all this territory, though, is controlled by the Central Powers, which, Russia's gone, right? I'm keeping their pieces on the board because they do have a possibility of coming back, and I have to keep track of what they have available and what they don't. They have basically no production, though, as it stands. Anyway, even on the worst results, I'm still doing more damage than I'm paying out, which is what you want. You may want to improve on that better, but the truth is, the more I can reduce the German value, and now it's down, it was over 100 at the beginning of the economic phase, and in this turn it's dropped all the way down to 60 due to damage and this, that, and the other. And fairly hefty results taken against them. So, the more I can trim down their ability to do more damage per attack on me through attrition, the better off I'm going to be for it. With the Russian surrender, they'll allow their interned fleet to leave Romania and go back up to St. Petersburg. That'll give them something. Yeah. I don't know what value it is. The Germans were only able to manage one attack at 1-3 over here, but they are shifting their forces. Now, I don't really want to pay to move units, especially when I have a whole pile of fresh stuff coming in that I can bring into play. So I'm kind of moving things naturally, but things like this, I may have to fund the movement of. In fact, these guys started here. Well, it's so expensive because if I moved them by boat, they'd be easy. But moving them by land, they cost a half point per space that they moved through. And there's 2 of them, so it would cost me $1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, $7 to move that 2 armies into place. It's much easier to just build new ones, but I don't have the new ones to build now. I could remove these. Or remove other armies and rebuild them. And that may be my best move in the long run. I ought to be considering that. Alternatively, I could pay the cost to convert them into field units, move them at field unit movement rates, which are much higher, and then convert them back. But that would be more expensive than actually moving the units. So for example, if I reduce the Italians, they could reappear here in, 3 turns really, because I reduce them this turn, I can't rebuild them, but then I could rebuild them up on the next turn up here. But then I still have to move them, and they're not moving very fast through the mountains here either. So just leaving them alone and moving them for free very, very slowly through this terrain. That is opening up the thought of, geez, do I want to do the economic warfare on the Allies? I don't know about that. That might be a little extreme. The Allies just made a single attack up here where the Germans are weak enough. Anything else would destabilize my line, probably to my disadvantage overall. Not something, I'm not looking forward to what I'm getting into here. I've got a lot of troops coming in though, and those can come in trench formation and make the attacks harder, more expensive, but higher cost for both sides basically. And that, if the odds work out, that I can get the 1-3s from the Germans, they're going to be able to make those attacks, whereas the Allies probably won't. One thing to note, corps, except for the German corps are awesome because they're actually half value. But the other corps in the game these were originally 3-4s, now they're 1-6s, so they really suck on the attack. The German corps are capable of attacking as well as German armies are, or anybody else is, any armies are. But that makes situations like fighting down here pretty much useless because either, I have to get another unit in there. I have to have 2-to-1 odds to get 1-3 on the table, basically, right? Numerically, I need the 2-to-1 to get the 1-3. And we'll be checking for Bulgaria at all here. And it felt like I had tons of points not long ago, but after the German attrition attacks, they've been able to do 1-3s and 1-2s, 1-2 here, 1-3s here and here. I think they may have done one here too, I don't know. But they pulled all their forces in. They've got the Western Allies drop down to almost nothing. Pretty soon, we're going to see those Western Allied armies just disappearing. I've got a whole bunch of units coming in. I'm going to have to disband them unless I can get enough troops on the field that the Germans can't manage attacks anymore. I don't know which way to go. If I disband them, I'm going to still run out of points. There just are too many turns left. So I'm going to have to hope that that's enough force to make it so that the Germans can't make significant attack or sufficient attacks to destroy the economies at this point. And as to the Germans, they're sitting here up at 40 or so. They're just going to start skyrocketing points because they've got the economic advantage and can just grind the enemy down without a problem. And I don't know that that's unreasonable, given that Russia fell and the Italians are in the war and everything. It definitely does not usually work out this way. Usually, though, the Central Powers do end up doing much better than historically. And it's often a tough fight. Not that it wasn't historically, but it's often a tougher fight waiting it out for the Americans to come in. There's a serious question of whether France is going to collapse. And in this one, it looks like they're well on the route to it. Allies threw their pile of troops into play. Mainly Brits over here. Huge amounts, 60 on some of these lines. Where the French are, the Germans managed to get one attack off. And if I smooth things out, it's going to be harder and harder for them, but they've got a lot of reinforcements coming to them. It just takes a while to get there. They managed to do some damage here, but we held out for a turn, which we wouldn't have without all those reinforcements. The points that those reinforcements would have created would have counted against, though. And here's the problem. This is what we're down to. We're down to just about nothing. And at this point, I had the option of taking damage from Greeks. I could have paid it off with the Brits, but instead I destroyed a Greek army. I'm going to have to pull back the Greeks. Well, they can't even defend most of Greece. I'm just giving them up, essentially. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to decommission them for points and just allow Greece to fall entirely. And I don't know quite how to rate that, because here's the thing. The Central Powers are probably getting as many points from Russia as Russia exists, maybe more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 33. Yeah, they're worth more than Russia was administering their own property, okay? And Greece is going to be the same kind of thing. Greece is worth like 5 points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but then they have Crete as well. So actually, conquered territory is more valuable than the country is on its own, which I find absurd, really. Here's another problem. Very shortly, the Germans can launch an invasion of Britain. Not a whole hell of a lot I can do about that, because the Brits don't have the money to launch a fleet. So if I wish to, I could invade Britain. It is so over at this point. But there's no solution, and the Allies can't do any kind of counterattacks. They don't have the ammunition. They don't have the funds to do it. It all becomes a game of manipulating these. Now, when you're playing the purely historical situation, it still feels very wrong. I suspect that playing the individual scenarios works better. From what I've seen of people who describe the game, some people seem to think it's a great game. And the only way I can see that is they never played the campaign, because it doesn't hold water. And that's probably the biggest thing I'd like to see fixed in a reprint is, hey, let's give it some real campaign rules that, make it work. I don't know if that's possible, though, with the singular values of the NRCs. They may just, handling everything that way may just make the game impossible to ever refactor into a shape that gives historical results over more than, say, a 6-month or maybe 1 year period that the scenarios hold. All right, I should just hang it up here, but we'll keep going. Just demobilize the Greeks, and they're just basically free for the taking. but I also demobilized a couple British and a French army. That should get me enough points to get me through maybe the next turn, but we'll see. Attrition results in 3 battles, doing 12 points each. The Allies end up losing 3 armies. They didn't have enough points between these 4.5, 5, 6 points. You know, I was thinking, well, the size. No, but the size started getting trimmed down because I had to reduce these to get those points, and now it's possible for the Germans with the same forces to inflict several 1 to 3 battles, and they're just trimming away the Allied armies. Meanwhile, more and more forces are coming up within range. We got a big pile of Italians and Austrians in here. This has no longer got the defensive bonus of being of entrenched units, I think. But it doesn't really matter. That bonus doesn't count if the attacker's using attrition attacks, which the attacker can't really do anything but that when they're in trench formation. It's really tough to do an assault when you're in trench formation. You're so incapable of it. And meanwhile, the Bulgarians slowly moving through Greece. No reason to spend points on anything like that. Not building more troops, no reason to spend points on that because it gets pumped back into the economy if I don't go fully mobilized. You know, the longer I can hold off building things, the better it is for the overall economy of the units. And it's going to be forever until the U.S. comes in. They don't come in until 17. So we're pretty much just watching what happens when one side or the other dissolves. And in this case, it's the Allies that are dissolving. I don't think I've ever seen this before. Come December, the Belgian army is wiped out. 2 more British armies, the Marines, all the remaining points. So there's nothing that can really be done. France probably cannot be held at this point. And, you know, just grinding with the attrition war is going to just keep being effective. I'll plug those away. The Allies will try to set themselves up so that they've got some kind of defense. I could, of course, you know, try to do assaults with the Central Powers to try to blast my way through this because it looks easy. But why do that? Why bother? The attrition table is just so awesome at knocking the opponent down. And if they can't respond because they don't have the points, you just wipe them out. This is usually what I see over in Russia. Russia's early fall, in part because of the Italians, in part because of my screw-ups, made this much easier to actually happen in the West. Usually the West has enough points that Russia mostly holds out until the U.S. is close to coming in, and then the U.S. extra points start channeling in, and you see, at that point it kind of comes to a real stalemate, and then eventually starts tilting the balance, and it's clear that the Allies will eventually overcome the Germans. Here it's absolutely clear the Germans are going to overrun France. I mean, it's all over. But, yeah. If you played the game out ad infinitum, the Americans could actually win the war if they come in because they have an infinitely increasing economic base. I don't know if that's really handled. I never really worried too much about the victory conditions in something like this, which is why I had to look them up to see what they were. You know, I'm not sure what the official end date for the Grand Campaign is. I just generally play it until it's obvious, and usually that's sometime in 1917, 1918, it starts becoming obvious that the Germans aren't going to get the traction that they need to break the West. And here, this is really the first time I'm seeing them break it. They have an easy job in Russia in every game of this, though. I honestly don't see much point in continuing here. It is so obvious. So I'm gonna call it here. But I do want to take a moment to look at the naval combat results table and explain why I'm so scared of this. So realize that the game is usually in this close balance, where maybe a unit or two gets destroyed at the end of a 6-month period or something. Okay, so if the Germans set sail with their fleet and the Brits manage to run into it with theirs, assuming you're at 1-to-1, You end up rolling on this fairly random table here. And the results are D, lose NRCs equal to the naval combat strength of the weaker force. And then you check this battle damage table to see how many turns it's going to take to repair your ships, how long they're going to be out of action. It's not a big deal if the German fleet is out of action, right? We already kind of established German Navy's a nice thing. It's a nice to have, but much as Kaiser Wilhelm loves it, he doesn't really need it to defend the continental territory. And the game already handles that, not allowing landings next to Hanover. And, you know, that pretty much makes it pretty difficult to really threaten the Germans navally. Britain, on the other hand, if their navy gets knocked out and there's still any navy out there, such as the big Mediterranean fleet here, they're in trouble. Okay. So the Ds are going to be just the full value of the NRCs of the naval combat. And, you know, we're talking 16 NRCs or something. That's a lot. On the other side, X is you lose naval combat strength points. Okay? So now, if the Germans lose their navy, again, it's not that big a deal. But if the English lose their navy, they're screwed. So there's kind of two things that can happen here, and the results usually are not the same. So this guy will lose the full NRCs as the attacker, and half the defender will lose them. But elsewhere, there are these XD mixed results where one side loses their fleet and the other side loses enough points that they might not be able to prosecute the land war very effectively. However, if the English lose their fleet and the Germans can hold out a little bit, they can wreak havoc in England. On the other hand, if the Germans lose their fleet, they get a big boost in terms of what they can do in the West Front. And what it just means is if you use the navies, the Germans are going to get a big jump. If they can successfully prosecute a battle, pretty much without fail. Sure, that big boost on the West Front probably won't win the war, and it's a one-shot bonus of maybe killing a couple armies in the course of a 6-month turn, a 6-month between economic phase setup. But it's pretty devastating compared to what else can happen. And the other side of it is far worse. I mean, you can strip England or force the Brits to start moving their forces into England to do a land defense there and no longer have their forces really in France anymore. It becomes an impossible situation. So I usually just leave the navies in port because the game gets so distorted by them. Much more so than La Grande Guerre. La Grande Guerre has a horribly problematic naval system which gives the Germans an advantage, but in this game it gives them, I believe, an insurmountable naval advantage. There's sort of no way they lose by playing with their navies, whereas in La Grande Guerre, you're risking something when you send your navies out. No matter what, the way the national will and everything works, there's so many intricate little pieces, you could end up causing your country to collapse by losing a naval battle. Of course, that goes both ways, and the Germans can, again, afford to lose their navy, whereas the Brits can't. And then there's also the fact that the German Navy is actually better than the British Navy. Even though it's smaller, it can still usually defeat it. But that's in that game. In this game, it's pretty much a crapshoot. You have a bigger British Navy, but you don't have it all conglomerated, so it's hard to engage all at once. Anyway, I'm stopping here because this is just getting to the silly point. At this point, France and England are suing for peace. They will probably gladly allow Germany to control Russia and, probably Luxembourg. And that's probably good enough. And Serbia, of course, is going to be Austrian, and Greece, and all kinds of crappy stuff like that's going to happen. All right, let's send this up.